Welcome to Gravetop Church Online. I'm your host, Homer Hargrove, and today we're starting a new series called Things Change. And this whole month, we're going to be talking about the life changes that we go through and how to deal with them in a spiritual and practical way. And today specifically, our title is, What Do I Do Now? And it's the question about what we do once the change happens in our lives. And the main idea is learning how to reflect on major life changes that we go through with an optimistic and realistic perspective for the past and the future. See, changes are inevitable, yet they always take us by surprise when we go through them. And we often imagine that we'd simply know what to do once change happens. But then when the life-altering change does happen, we're stuck with this question, what do I do now? And today we're going to talk about the reality of change in our lives and how we can hold realistic expectations with them. And we're going to learn when to adapt and when to hold steady with certain things in our lives. And our goal really today in this message is to eliminate or at least decrease the stress that comes from major changes, as well as the imposter syndrome that comes with change. And the reason that this topic is so important to talk about is because everyone feels like they're the only ones who are struggling through the change. And no one should feel less about themselves while going through this kind of dramatic change in life, because no one else is exempt from feeling that struggle. What I would say is, everyone is valuable, but no one is special. What I mean by that is because everyone is important, meaningful, and valuable, we're all going through struggles together. And because we're all experiencing struggles, yes, some harder than others, you don't have to feel like you're special to the extent that you're broken or something, because we're all struggling through it too. Now let's get started with the first point, which is the despair of change. And in this point, I want us to understand that transitions in life are always the hardest. The transitions that change our way of life. See, while we're naturally resistant to change, we like to all believe that we like change, but it's in our nature to resist change. And change is one of the very few things in the world that is guaranteed to happen. So much so that some people believe that nothing is true. That the only thing true and constant is change itself. Be that as it may, some changes are still harder than others. And the most difficult ones are these that change how we live. And I want to share Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 through 8. It says, "For everything there is a season, a time for every activity under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to harvest, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to cry and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to turn away, a time to search and a time to quit searching, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be quiet and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace." See, when we go through these kinds of life seasons, that we don't usually fully anticipate the emotions that come with it. See, we only notice when it's the difficult times. We don't notice the peace times. We only notice the times of war. We don't notice the times of love. We only notice the times of hate. And it's easy to forget that we have good times when we have had good times when we're going through those bad times. And when we're going through these kinds of transitions, we get emotional. And I don't think anyone fully anticipates how emotional they actually get through this roller coaster of life that we're going through. And it causes our state of mind to be confused and unsure as we struggle to try to get a grip of life again. And to understand this fully, I would say that with every major life-altering change that we go through, sometimes it feels so chaotic that we feel as though we don't really have time to understand the emotions that we're going through. It makes me think about like having a baby. That's one of the most life-altering changes you can go through, and you don't even recognize how emotional you get through it. Not to mention the life change itself brings upon its whole nother level of challenges. Like you don't realize how much sleep deprivation causes you to feel differently about your spouse. It is something so pivotal to recognize, because when you recognize your feelings and how they're directly related to the change or the transitions in your life, see, that's pivotal to relocating your rational judgment. When you're emotional, you are not thinking right. You are not making rational judgments and decisions. You're making decisions based off of emotions. And as an example, like I'm saying, with children, with having children, nearly every single couple my wife and I have counseled through it for marriage counseling, almost every single one of them had just had a baby within 6 months. You're talking about the biggest complications that they've had in their lives is within the 6 months that they've had one of the most major life changes. And it's the first time that they're even considering divorce, the first time that they're ever getting into the most craziest fights they've ever had. And it's within that time that they have had this major life change. And if you were to allow yourself to connect the dots and know that you are feeling emotional, that's okay. You're allowed to feel emotions, but do not make big decisions when you're already going through big changes. You feel what I'm saying? And if you would just allow yourself to just wait, allow yourself to let some time pass from this big change before you make any changes, you will be able to have so much more clarity and rational judgment after the emotions calm down. You know, on this note, I'm talking about the despair of change. One thing I have to say, what often comes with big changes like this is something that we don't expect, is that our ego is directly connected to our emotions. How you feel about yourself is connected to your emotions. And often when we go through major life changes, we either try to blame others or blame ourselves. And this is the key time where we get imposter syndrome. And we start doubting everything that we have built in our lives. We start thinking, well, we're just a phony. We're just lucky that we've made it this far, but now it's all going to crumble because I'm really not good enough to be able to handle this. Look at all how hard it is around me. It is too difficult, and it's only because I'm not good enough. Let me tell you right now that a lot of us feel this way. It's not true. Those are lies that we're trying to create within ourselves to make sense of it all. But there's some things that you don't necessarily need to make sense to. It's just something that you're going through. So don't believe any negative lies about yourself or about even people that are close to you, because your ego is just trying to make sense of it all. Allow yourself to calm down and live in the moment. With that being said, what a great transition to our next point, live in the moment. And within this point, I want us to grasp balance in life is not always possible. You hear it time and time again, you just need to find balance. This is the way you can find balance. And the idea of finding balance, it's nice. It's a pretty idea that seems like it would work on paper. But many people are left feeling even more exhausted and stressed out trying to find balance than they were when they were just stressed out in their lives. It's like you're getting more stressed out trying to achieve this peace than when you were just allowing yourself to go through it. See, we think that there's this like perfect equation of time management and energy that if we can solve it if we're just more disciplined. If we're just disciplined enough, we can solve this equation of balance. And it sounds good when you say it, but it simply doesn't always work when you actually try to apply it, because balance is an oversimplified solution to complicated lives. What I'm saying is that there's not a one size fits all when it comes to life's problems and situations. I remember years ago, there's a new mother that was a part of our church, And they were being transparent on social media, and they shared that they were really struggling trying to find balance, that they feel overwhelmed with their kids, that they really want to do X, Y, or Z, that they really want to get this in order, but they're just so chaotic. And some network marketing person commented on their post, trying to promote their life coaching skills, and they put on there. This was a single person without kids giving somebody who was married with kids life coaching advice, and their advice was, well, if you were to just wake up 30 minutes earlier, that's all you need to be able to seize the day. And it's like the simple idea of like, oh, just wake up 30 minutes earlier. That's step one. Book me for more steps. And what I thought was, this is hilarious, because this person has no idea what it's like to have only 5 hours of sleep interrupted every 45 minutes from your crying newborn baby. The idea of getting up 30 minutes earlier is probably, it's possible in normal circumstances, but with this big life change, and you're taking care of a newborn, waking up 30 minutes early when you already don't have any sleep seems close to impossible. It looks good on paper, but it's not really practical. And it's a simple idea of when you're trying to just oversimplify a complicated problem. And I think that this verse really equates it the best. This is not necessarily what Jesus is talking about, but I feel like it applies really well. In Matthew chapter 16, verses 25 through 26, if you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake, you will save it. And what do you benefit if you gain the whole world but lose your own soul? Is anything worth more than your soul? And I feel like we often lose our souls as we're trying to force ourselves into this life of balance where we just do a little bit of everything, and we lose what really matters. And I think what this verse exemplifies is that instead of trying to find balance, instead maybe you should make a list of what your current priorities in life are right now. That list of priorities may change in a couple months, in a couple years, but look at what your top priorities are right now, and maybe just focus on what matters most rather than trying to give yourself to everything. And just think about it. How does it make sense that I'm already burnt out and stressed? I need to find balance. So I'm going to try to give more energy and effort in getting balance so that I'll feel better about not having any more energy or effort. Y'all think what I'm saying? The idea of living in the moment, what I'm saying is you need to calm down. You need to calm down and determine what matters most in your life right now, understanding that may change in the future. And once you get your priorities straight of what matters most right now, you can learn what things you can say yes to, and most importantly, what things you should say no to. Once you start saying no to the things that aren't in your current priorities, you will start to feel a lot better, and even you'll be able to enjoy a lot more the things that you are saying yes to. Imagine that your energy for the day is like a tank of gas that you can only fill up once a day. And even with that, you don't always get to fill up that tank of gas to 100%. Sometimes you wake up and you only have 60% in your tank. You know what I'm saying? Imagine that you have your priorities right, and you know that you have to get from A to B today. Maybe you need to get from A to B, then to C, and then make it back to A, right? You need to make this round trip. And those are your priorities. And every single thing that you say yes to is making a pit stop off of your main course. And you're going off the highway, and you're wasting time and you're wasting gas in this pit stop. Now, you can say yes to some things, but if you say yes to all things, you won't be able to make it to your final destination. You're going to be way too burnt out. You're not going to be able to make it there. If anything, you'll have to you're going to run out of gas and walk. I don't know. But you get what I'm saying. You're not going to be able to be where you need to be mentally, physically, emotionally if you say yes to all these other things that waste your gas. And if you understand what matters most right now, I'll use the same example of like when you have children. That before I had kids, my wife was a number two priority. Number one priority was my walk with God and having a devotion life. Number two was my wife. And then number three was ministry. I love ministry. I love doing ministry. It gives me life. I just really thoroughly enjoy it. But what I used to do is I had my disciplined time for devotion. I had a disciplined routine of date nights and time with my wife and clear communication. And then I would be able to, I was very able to say yes to a lot of different kinds of ministry. I'm talking about multiple part-time jobs of ministry time. Once I had kids, I realized very quickly that whenever I said yes to additional ministry, I was giving less of myself to my children. I was giving less of myself to my wife, and I just could not hold all things up together. I had to put my priorities right. And maybe I can do a whole bunch more additional ministry like I used to in the future when my kids are older. But right now, my kids are babies. They're real little. And so I had to change my priorities so that I could give the best of myself to what matters most right now. With children especially, your kids aren't going to be babies forever. There's going to be a day where they're teenagers and they don't want to have anything to do with you. And then you'll have plenty of time to do these extra things. But right now, perhaps that you need to get your priorities right and see what matters most, and be as creative as you want, but just understand that you only have so much gas in your tank for the day. Y'all dig what I'm saying? And with all that, I'm telling you that we need to have our priorities straight. But what I'm really getting at is that you should allow yourself to appreciate and enjoy whatever your current priorities are right now. When I'm not saying yes to everything, I'm able to really appreciate my kids, my wife, the things that are most priority right now, my church. I'm able to appreciate that a lot more when I have my priorities straight. And with all that I'm saying, be reasonable enough with yourself to allow grace for those imperfect moments, imperfect timings. What I mean by that is I'm telling you to make priorities and make that your goal, but I'm not telling you that you have to be the strict person that just says no to everything either. Have your priorities straight, reflect on your emotions, and be graceful to yourself. Think about it this way. How many times did you plan to hang out with someone and have to cancel? It was something that you wanted to do, but then you ended up having to cancel. Well, life is a lot like that. Just allow yourself that same kind of grace to know that you're making these priorities. There might be times where you step away here and there, but you still have this main goal of living in the moment for whatever your life has for you right now. Y'all dig what I'm saying? Now let's talk about one last thing, and that is grow from the change. Do your best to learn from life without becoming jaded. See, there's certain changes that are hard, but there's also those changes that are hurtful. That where you come out on the other side and you feel so hurt in the process and you're almost like traumatized of going through something like that again. And it's easy to not fully recognize your emotions or even your these subconscious beliefs that were created after going through major life change. And these suppressed feelings, these suppressed ideas become these staples of core memories for our life that shape our mindset, our worldview, even our defenses and behaviors, an effort to somehow subconsciously be more prepared for dramatic change in the future. And it often leaves us feeling jaded and bitter. A small story. For me, one of those core memories, I remember I was like in 5th grade, and I remember very specifically that we didn't have a lot of groceries in the house. And one of my parents told me that they were going to go to the grocery store that day, and they didn't end up going. And I remember I was throwing this huge fit as this young kid. And I was saying, "You said you were going to go to the grocery store. We don't have any food. I'm starving." And I was throwing this huge fit. And I had an older brother that I noticed that was like kind of like scowling at me the whole time. And finally, he just spoke up and said, "A lot of people have it worse." And in that moment, I felt so guilty for throwing a fit and thinking that in that simple statement That it was something that person, that relative of mine probably doesn't even remember. But see, that simple statement, we were going through a big life change. We had moved to another state, there was different jobs. It's just a lot of changes all at once. And what going through all those changes, that simple statement caused this core memory to where I was like, what, fifth grade then? And now I'm in my 30s and it literally still rings through my head. To where even now, I have hard times in certain prayers of asking God for something because I feel almost ashamed to ask God for anything because I think, well, there's other people that have it worse. And see, that was something so simple, but left this core memory that made me feel jaded to ask for certain things, to feel like I deserve things. And it's things like that in our lives where we create these, what I would say is these lies about ourselves, these false beliefs. See, a very popular one that a lot of us believe when we go through changes with loved ones or relationships, we begin to believe that we're destined to be alone, that we're either broken or we're unlovable. See, those are lies that we believe. And what I'm saying is that we should try to grow from life changes without becoming jaded, and recognize those moments where we're truly hurt or bitter and rejecting the lies that our subconscious is trying to believe to make us feel better. And this is really why it's so important to reflect on your emotions and try to understand what exactly made you feel the certain ways you did. Getting to the root of where it all started, why you're feeling like that, learning to process the experience. It's necessary to being able to let go of whatever lie that was created within you because of that experience. You can learn and grow from it, but you don't have to believe these lies. A simple idea that I would use to describe it is a saying called "eat the meat and spit out the bones." And I don't even like fish, okay, but there's this concept that with fish have bones in them, and you can just eat the meat, and whenever you get a bone, you spit it out. And I feel like life is like that a lot, that you can look back at whatever experience, take what you can get from it, eat the meat, and whatever is just simply chaos, whatever is just simply, there's nothing to get from it, it was just a bummer, it was just bad, it was just hard to go through, spit those bones out. You don't have to try to dissect every little thing. Just take what you can and spit out the bones. Throw out whatever you don't need to keep. And there's some experiences in life where you're like, wow, I really learned a lot from that experience. And then there's other things where it's like, man, that was a dang bony fish. Like, that's like just full of bones. And I want to share this final verse as we get ready to close. It's in 1 Corinthians 13, 11 through 13. And it says, when I was a child, I spoke and I thought and reasoned as a child. But when I grew up, I put away childish things. Now we see things imperfectly, like puzzling reflections in a mirror. But then we will see everything with perfect clarity. All that I know now is partial and incomplete. But then I will know everything completely, just as God knows me completely. 3 things will last forever: faith, hope, and love. The greatest of these is love. Man, Paul is such a poet in this passage. And what I see here is him, when he's saying what I know now compared to what I know then, what he's talking about is his future self. And what we're seeing here is that it's at the end of our lives where we can look back and realize God's hand and all throughout our life, all these different parts of our lives. But when we're going through the puzzle pieces of life, it doesn't make sense. It's only at the end of the life that we can see this beautiful picture. And in the same way that it's at the end that we are able to look back and see these parts that make sense. It's also what we see that matters most. See, Paul says the thing that matters most is love. And at the end of any person's life, that's what they think about, is those they have loved and those who have loved them. And if we can grasp that no matter what changes we're going through, love is what can really be the foundation we stand on. It really helps making those priorities easy. And I think the greatest love that we could ever know is seen through Jesus Christ. When we reflect his gesture of love to us, it's the greatest thing that can help carry us through any life change that we go through, that where even when we're left with that question, what do I do now? We know that we can trust God with the mystery, that we can trust God with the parts that we don't understand. With that being said, if you feel like today is a day that you need to make a decision for Christ, maybe you've never made that decision before, maybe you've kind of danced around church and God, but right now you realize that you really have this unction, this urge in your heart to put your trust in Jesus, and you want to do that today. The Bible says in the book of Romans that if you believe in your heart and confess with your mouth that Jesus is who he says he is, surely you shall be saved. What it's saying is, if you have a genuine heart and talk to him yourself, acknowledge who he is, the Son of God that died on the cross and rose from the dead, that's all it takes to start this journey with him, this relationship with him. You don't need me to lead you through a pretty prayer. You can simply talk to him yourself. If that is you here today, I really encourage you to have that conversation now. Don't even wait till later. Just pause and have that conversation with Jesus right now. With that being said, I'm so grateful for you guys being a part of our online service today. If Gravetop Church has made an impact in your life and you'd like to help us make an impact in other people's lives, you can do that by donating and going to gravetopchurch.com. Click the donate tab and you're able to help extend that impact into somebody else's life. And when it comes to giving, and we never want anyone to feel pressured or persuaded to donate when they don't want to. It's something to be done out of your own heart. And the Bible even says itself that to not give out of compulsion, but that God loves a cheerful giver. It's a simple act of worship between you and God, and we're simply stewards of that generosity. But just know that when you do donate, it truly does make an impact and help us to continue to reach others. Until next time, I'm so grateful for you guys. Have a good life.